If you have known me for more than a minute, you know that it's not exactly my kind of music. However, how can one who works in the beautiful region of Waterloo not choose ABBA's Waterloo to start the show on a Tuesday morning? Tariff Tuesday, the 4th of March, 2025. Because it was on this day in 1974, 51 years ago, that ABBA released Waterloo, which was the first single from their second album and the first to be credited to the group performing under the name ABBA. Later became the winning entry for Sweden in the 1974 Eurovision Song Contest and a number one hit in several countries, including the U.S., where it reached top 10, went on to sell nearly 6 million copies, making it one of ABBA's best-selling singles in the band's history. How do you like them, ABBAs? Or something like that. Number one on this day released on this day in 1974. Good Tuesday morning. Thank you very much for stopping by, spending some of your valuable time with us. I know that the time that you have is the most valuable commodity in a time where our commodities are getting less and less valuable, aren't they? Those dollars just aren't stretching quite as far as they used to. And apparently that's going to get even less so as the tariffs promised, threatened by U.S. Donald Trump come into effect today. But thanks very much for being a part of the show. And please use it to share some insight from your corner of the world. Maybe the tariffs impact you or the work that you do. Maybe you just need to vent about it. That's part of the reason that we're here, right? We like to have these conversations, get some stuff off our chest. And every day when we start the show, our phone lines are open to you at 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. As you would have heard during All News Mornings with Christine Clark and Mark Douglas, today is the day. In fact, Regional Council sitting down as we speak to decide how they will fill the seat on Regional Council vacated by Rob Deutschmann, who resigned his seat in order to run in the provincial election. Rob was unsuccessful in that election, but nonetheless, having resigned his seat, one of the 4 seats for the city of Kitchener on Regional Council now sits vacant, and Council must figure out how to fill it. Curiously, I suspect that another regional councillor who also ran unsuccessfully in the provincial election but did not resign her seat, will be at the council table today making the decision on what to do with the other seat, because she just took a leave of absence, so she just slides right back into that job because it's waiting for her, even though she's thought for a little while she might want to do something else provincially. Nonetheless, the answer to this question is simple. I don't know how long Regional Council needs to meet about this, but the answer is a by-election. We voted in a municipal election back in 2022. So a little more than 2 years ago, coming up on 2.5 years ago. You do not appoint the runner-up from that time because, frankly, our minds may have changed as to the kind of representation we would like on Regional Council. So you can't just appoint the runner-up or the next most votes from 2.5 years ago. Doesn't work that way. And unfortunately, even though we do elect councillors to serve our interests at the council table, that does not include, I don't believe, council making the decision as to who should represent us by appointing someone of their choosing. So that's not the way to do it either. And I recognize that these things cost money, but democracy is sometimes messy. Democracy is sometimes expensive. The democratic way to fill this vacated seat is to do so through a by-election, and that's it. That's really the only answer to this. And if you're worried about the cost, I'll remind you that the city of Waterloo found $2.9 million for a very worthwhile project, but we talked about it last week, the former St. Columba Church on Lincoln Road being purchased by the city so that it can build some housing there eventually. And we were told it's kind of like that rainy day account. Municipal budgets account for this. Well, then the municipal budget regionally can account for whatever it costs to hold a by-election so that we, as voters, can choose, because that is our democratic right. We get to choose. And if you want to take it even half a step further, can we consider that for the last 6 weeks or so, somehow regional council has continued to function without two of its members from Kitchener because they were running provincially? I think things might be okay for the next 18 months or so until the next municipal election. But that's just me. That's where I'm coming from on this. Regional council, the answer today is simple. It's not blowing in the wind. Bob Dylan thought the answer was blowing in the wind. This answer coming out of the mouth of hot air here at the radio station. Hold a by-election, okay? It's the Democratic thing to do. All right, let's get to your Farwell Show 5 for this Tuesday morning. Number 1, you can call this Tariff Tuesday, as U.S. President Donald Trump's deadline for economy-wide tariffs has passed. His executive order hitting Canada and Mexico with 25% across-the-board tariffs with a lower levy on Canadian energy took effect just after midnight. Ontario Premier Doug Ford not taking the news lightly.
You have two choices here, folks. We roll over as a country and just let them run over us, or we fight like hell, like we've never fought before. I'm taking option 2. I'm fighting like hell, and we're going to protect Canada. He's underestimating the Canadian people, the resilience of the Canadian people, and the strength of the Canadian people.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau calls the tariffs unjustified and says Canada will retaliate with counter tariffs and other measures. Trudeau has a news conference scheduled for later this morning. Number 2, a new survey finds 2/3 of Canadian business leaders polled say they can weather a trade war that lasts more than a year. The report by KPMG also says that 86% support retaliatory tariffs against the U.S. Number 3 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, Waterloo holding off on a plan to implement inclusionary zoning in new developments. An inclusionary zoning bylaw would require new private developments along the Ion route to include affordable rental units. The new bylaw was supposed to come into effect at the end of this month, but the city heard that the economics for development have become more complicated in recent years, and introducing inclusionary zoning now could potentially further slow the recovery of the housing market and make it more challenging to build in transit-oriented sites. A new plan for implementing inclusionary zoning will come back to council later this year. Number 4, Kitchener Council has said no to a 2-tower plan for King Street East near Sports World. The site of a former gas station was to include more than 700 condo units along with office and commercial space, but council voted it down last night.
At the end of the day, this is not the right location for any development. It's pretty much on the on-ramp, beside the on-ramp to the 401, and I just can't see this being a livable space for anyone.
That's Ward 4 councillor in Kitchener, Christine Michaud, expressing her opposition to the proposal. The developer still has the option of appealing the city's decision at the Ontario Land Tribunal. And number 5 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, Alanis Morissette is heading to Las Vegas for her first residency. The Ottawa-raised singer will perform 8 shows at the Coliseum at Caesars Palace. The residency will take place on several dates between October the 15th and November the 2nd. And that is your Farwell Show 5 for this Tuesday morning. Your phone calls coming up right after this break on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Every day we start, phone lines are open. It's a two-way street here. We love the conversation. Let's go to the phones. Steve, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, listening to your entry there, 100% correct. They need to do a by-election. There's no debate about it. And good for you for stating just the obvious logical choice. Problem is, this city council or regional council, I don't know. Who knows what they're going to do? Because when you're in power, you seem to think that you just know better for everybody rather than just doing the right thing, I guess. We see that like all stretches of government. So I hope they do the by-election, but I wouldn't be surprised with whatever they come up with. On a side note, listening to Doug Ford these last few days, you played the little clip of him there. Does he not sound more and more like a guy who's gearing up to run for prime minister in the next election?
I thought the same thing, Steve. I don't think he's going to, but he's sure carrying that flag, isn't he?
As a devout conservative, let me tell you, I sincerely hope he doesn't. But, yeah, just listening to him, like, he doesn't address Ontario. He's, like, addressing all of Canada every time he speaks. And it's like, I don't know what he's trying to sell himself down the road or what. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. And when he was on NBC last evening talking about these tariffs and talking tough about them, He had the Ontario flag, the U.S. flag, and the Canadian flag behind him. And I will also just add, Steve, thanks for adding your voice to what should be the obvious choice for regional council today. The way to fill the vacated seat is through a by-election. Simple as that. Rory, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Mike. How you doing, sir?
Good, my friend. How are you?
I'm not doing too bad. I wanted to comment on the regional seat being open, and I believe it's based on the provincial legislation that it has to be filled, Mike? Is that...
Yeah, I don't think we can let it sit.
Is that what we're faced with?
I believe so.
Okay. Then my option would be to have Karen Redmond request to the Minister of Municipal Affairs to leave the seat vacant until the next election.
I don't know that I would hate that. Yeah.
Save us $1 million. We got an election, albeit in a year and a half. I'm not saying that that's a short time or a long time, but I mean, let's be honest. Kitchener has lots of representation. And at this point, why are we going to spend $1 million for, an election that's just going to happen next year? Let's ask the province for an exemption and leave it at that.
You know what, Rory? I think you're onto something there. When you want to talk, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here, but there has long been talk, kind of back burner talk, but when it comes to regional council and you look at its makeup, 2 councillors for Waterloo, 2 councillors for Cambridge, 1 for each of the townships by representation of the mayor of that township, and then 4 for Kitchener. Is that necessarily the right balance? And so to that end, again, without getting too deep into the weeds, but could you survive, do you think, Kitchener, with 3 representatives on regional council? My answer to that would be probably. I don't hate where Rory's going with this either. The important thing to remember here, I think, Steve agrees with by-election because it should be up to the voters. Even if we go Rory's way, which I don't hate, and leave it vacant, the important thing to take away from this regional council is that it's not up to you to appoint, and you don't just take the runner-up from 2.5 years ago, because our minds may have changed as to the kind of representation we want. So let's do this the right way. Paul, good morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Did I surprise you sneaking in on the 800?
Yes, you did. I thought, what kind of Paul is this? Is it a long-distance call from Preston now?
No, nobody was picking up on the Star 570.
You're a smart guy. The Star 570 was busy. That's good.
Hey, listen. The first point, democracy isn't cheap. The only option is a by-election. Now, having said that, if in the past or sometime in the future we had a ranked ballot, then I would consider the second place, because if you've got candidates A, B, C, and D running, I may have voted for A. Okay, and A may have won, B may have come in second place on just a regular.
I get that, but that was 2.5 years ago, Paul. Don't you think your mind may have changed since October of 2022?
Oh, it could have.
Yeah.
This is why I say democracy ain't cheap.
Absolutely.
The by-election is the way to go.
It 100% is. And did we just have a unanimous decision here? We have reached consensus on the Mike Farwell show today. Dear Regional Council, hold a by-election. You're welcome. You can call the meeting early today. This is the Mike Farwell show. Meeting adjourned. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Well, it is a Tariff Tuesday here on the program, and we will talk about tariffs throughout the day. We will get word from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in the next hour or so. I add the or so with a little bit of emphasis because, as I understand it, his news conference is scheduled for 10:30. Notoriously late are these news conferences. Do you remember back in the day when it was all COVID all the time and we were hearing daily from Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau, and we would bring you their comments live every day? And I remember watching the TV monitor in my studio here, an empty podium awaiting the approach of the leader of that particular hour so they could bring you information. Anyway, Justin Trudeau, 10:30-ish, we will call it on the show today. And then, well, we won't carry his comments live, but you'll get those updates from the 570 News Center, and we'll continue to weave the tariff theme through the show today. It also happens to be the first Tuesday of the month, and that means Regional Police Chief Mark Crowell, along with Staff Sergeant Scott Griffiths, will be in studio with us between 11 and noon, answering your policing questions. How about like gunfire, shots fired at a house in Cambridge over the weekend? We'll talk about that and more with our police leaders, and you can have questions answered between 11 and noon as we do the first Tuesday of every month. Along with the tariffs, there was that bizarre and, dare I say, unprecedented exchange in the Oval Office on Friday between President Donald Trump and President Volodymyr Zelensky. What do we make of all of this? We'll do a deeper dive right after this update from the 570 News Center. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio. I remember joking earlier this year with our next guest that when things go sideways, he's the person I reach out to. When things go sideways in the world, and when we're trying to understand global events and their impacts here in Canada, or just get a better understanding of those world events, I reach out to Andrew Basso, who's a professor of political science at Wilfrid Laurier University, and also a senior fellow at the Balsley School for International Affairs. And we talk often about Russia, Ukraine. And then, of course, Friday happened in the White House, in the hallowed halls that surround the Oval Office. And this sent such shockwaves through even this community that I went to the hockey game on Friday night, and that's all anybody could talk about, even at the Memorial Auditorium before a good old-fashioned Friday night hockey game. Those are the ripple effects as Andrew Basso joins the show yet again this morning, because things have gone sideways, Andrew, and I need your help on this.
Yeah, unfortunately, it sounds like I'm the angel of death now. Oh, God.
Take me back to Friday afternoon and your reaction to what you were hearing and seeing come out of the Oval Office.
Yeah, I think when you diagnose that meeting, there's been a lot of tut-tuttings from many, especially in the partisan world. I think if you take a sober analysis of this, it's pretty clear that this was a bit of an ambush of Zelensky. That the main question that pops into my mind is, how do you reason with someone, i.e. Trump, who has power but chooses to live in an alternative reality? I grew up in football and rugby locker rooms, to be clear, and I've heard much more civil and intellectual conversation on the worst days there than we saw at Trump and Vance last week. Trump wanted to end the war in Ukraine in a day, but I propose the following understanding. He just undid 80 years of American diplomacy in 8 minutes. That you agree with Russia on political whatevers at your own peril, border redrawings, ending wars. Russia will violate these agreements. It seems like Trump has just fallen right into the trap that Putin has laid for him. There has been an extreme reaction to this meeting, and one of the things that Vance actually said in the meeting that just drives me wild is that he said Biden's war drums caused the invasion, and that Zelensky's inability to be a diplomat caused the invasion. Just to be clear, Putin chose this war, and it had nothing to do with Biden at the time. It had nothing to do with Zelensky. This is very clearly a war of conquest and a war of choice, all the way down to Trump saying that Zelensky was being offensive by not wearing a suit. I mean, come on. You can't give a wooden nickel about what people wear, and so much for the side of freedom and choice then. Zelensky is not a dictator, and when I think about the accusation of Zelensky as a dictator, I think that's incredibly offensive on a lot of levels, but one of the main levels is Trump, he looks up to a British war leader, Winston Churchill, and I think that he would be wise to learn from history that Churchill, when he visited the White House, he didn't wear a suit either, and Churchill, there were suspended elections in the United Kingdom during the war because most constitutions have some sort of clause like this built in. If you are under attack, then you can suspend elections. In fact, it's actually democratically encouraged because otherwise you cannot have a free and fair election. Essentially, what that meeting was lies and mental gymnastics from Team Trump, and it is causing a world in chaos right now.
Is there any merit to the argument, Andrew, that Zelensky does not want this war to end?
Yeah, I think there is. And frankly, I don't think he should choose to end the war right now. The Russians are really on the back foot. It may not seem it, but here's something that really is boggling to the mind. That Russian casualties, they will reach somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 million by May 9. And May 9 is a major day in Russia. It's Victory Day over the Nazis. You have to square that with 1 million casualties in a war that is being waged for an authoritarian. The Ukrainians, they are actually doing quite well. I'm not going to sit here, though, and say the Ukrainians have done everything perfect. They themselves, they've had about 420,000 casualties, about 45,000 dead and 370,000 wounded. Moreover, I think we have to take a bit of a higher level on war here, that wars ended badly breed new wars. This is a fundamental lesson of history, and we would be wise to learn it. If we don't learn it, then we're going to be back in this conflict all over again very quickly. So any sort of peace agreement, it actually benefits Russia more than anybody. Russia has about a year left on armored personnel carriers and most armored vehicles. They're using donkeys for supply line logistics, as I said last time. And things are not going well. Russia is very clearly losing this at the current moment via attrition. And the Ukrainians, they have the right to defend their territory. Essentially what I'm saying is any peace that's thrust on Ukraine right now, at best, it would be an unjust peace. It would be an unjust ceasefire. And it would be Trump thinking that he can dictate terms. And fortunately or unfortunately for him, he can't in this situation.
Are you able to stick around a little longer this morning, Andrew?
Sure.
Thank you. As always, I appreciate the time that you give us. I'm going to put Andrew on hold and we'll continue this conversation right after this quick timeout, because does Ukraine continue to succeed against Russia without U.S. support, and could that support be withdrawn? We'll continue the conversation with Andrew Basso, professor of political science at Wilfrid Laurier University and a fellow at the Balsley School of International Affairs. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Professor of political science at Wilfrid Laurier University and a fellow at the Balsley School of International Affairs. Just reflecting on that meeting between Presidents Trump and Zelensky on Friday in the Oval Office. Andrew, without U.S. support, does Ukraine stand a chance against Russia? Would the U.S. withdraw its support here?
This is where I've pulled out the crystal ball, because this becomes a projection. So looking at Ukrainian stockpiles, then, you can say the Ukrainians can probably last on their own for about 6 months, maybe to a year. But this is a really complicated picture. You have the Russian casualty rates, Ukrainian casualty rates, but primarily the loss of U.S. support means the loss of air defense artillery assets, which means more cities are going to be destroyed and more domicide, destruction of homes, is going to occur. The Ukrainians will not be able to shoot down incoming Russian bombardments of cities and towns. And just to be clear, that bombardment is way outside the boundaries of the laws of armed conflict and is absolutely a war crime. Unfortunately, the pulling of U.S. support could mean a death sentence for many Ukrainian civilians. This is an objectively morally bankrupt policy. The pulling of other U.S. support, including artillery shells and other ammunition. The Ukrainians can survive for a little while, as I said, but they can't survive forever. It really is critical to have U.S. support, but at the same rate, the Europeans, they are responding to the Oval Office meeting with gusto. Just in the last few hours, the Europeans, they've launched a Rearm Europe campaign, and they're allowing EU member states to go into debt, which they otherwise wouldn't be allowed to by EU rules, in order to dip into an $800 billion defense fund that's being provided to EU members. They are going to rearm themselves here. It's not going to be tomorrow. It's not going to be in a week or a month. It's going to be a year out at least. But there is a shifting power center in IR, and it's moving away from Washington and more towards Brussels and Strasbourg and Frankfurt. That Ukraine can hold out for a while, especially if the Europeans, they step up their aid even further. To be clear, the European Union, on the whole, has supported Ukraine more on a dollar-for-dollar basis than the United States has. And where Trump has gotten his lie of $350 billion in aid to Ukraine is beyond me by any mathematical calculation. And I realize I'm better with words than numbers, but these are pretty simple numbers. There has been no transfer of $350 billion. So we're about to find out what the world is going to look like. But I will say this. 2025 is probably going to be the climax of the war, that this is probably where all the cards get put down, and we are really nearing the end of the Texas Hold'em hand here.
I know that when I ask this question, I'm asking it about somebody who was described in my weekend paper as a madman, and probably that's not too far off the mark. But can we get inside the head of Donald Trump at all here, Andrew, and try to figure out what his end game was with this meeting? You mentioned earlier he wants to dictate the end of the war. Is that at all costs? Like what might the end game have been for U.S. President Trump in that meeting?
This is another weird one that who knows what Trump wants. It seems like his attitudes change hour by hour, post by post on Twitter or Truth Social or any sort of interview that he does. What we do know is that we have an administration down there of Trump and Vance that are equally short-sighted and aggressive. That is a deadly combination, that they will not listen to people who actually know things because they live in their own world where they are the arbiters of everything that is true and good. That being said, if I had to give you my gut reaction, it's that Trump is angling here for a quick peace plan so he can deliver on a campaign promise. He's trying to extort the Ukrainians with this mineral deal because Trump does rule like a mafia boss, if nothing else. He's extraordinarily transactional. The question looms, though, that is he a Russian shill? Who knows? But I have to say that Russian media, when you examine all platforms of Russian media, Russian commentators who are war hawks there, they are glad that Trump is doing what he is doing. So if he's not full-on shilling for Russia, he's doing the dirty work for them inadvertently. I lean more towards the side that he really likes Putin and his way of governing. He likes the strongman archetype. And one thing that you see in international politics is that authoritarians love other authoritarians because it legitimizes them. I think we're going to have a lot more clarity on this question of what Trump is doing tonight when he addresses Congress at 9 p.m. Eastern. This is where he lays out his domestic and his foreign policy visions for the United States. So very likely he's going to be touching on the tariffs on Canada and Mexico and China. He is truly something else. And I'm not kidding. In 8 minutes, he undid 80 years of American diplomacy. He has proven that the Americans are unreliable partners. So if I were PM, God help us all, but if I were the Prime Minister of Canada, I would be looking for other reliable partners. That would be the European Union. That if I were the Europeans and I was rearming, I would be buying European arms, not American arms. That the subtle thing that Trump has done here is he has killed off American businesses and their international interests, that nobody is going to want to buy military equipment from the Americans because they don't know if the flow of spare parts is going to be turned off on the whim of a president. So we are entering truly a world in chaos. And was that meeting in the Oval Office the saddest day in American history? Probably not. And it's probably more the 12th of April, 1861, when Confederate troops opened fire on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, defending an asinine position of chattel slavery. But this was one of the saddest days in American history, and we've seen the abandonment of the rules-based order internationally for Trump's likely love affair with might equals right.
Andrew, it's a fascinating time, and as always, angel of death or otherwise. Appreciate you carving out time for the show. Thank you.
Anytime, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Andrew Basso, professor of political science at Wilfrid Laurier University and fellow at the Balsley School of International Affairs. The saddest day in U.S. history? No. Top 5 saddest? Probably. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Let's go to the phones, hear from you on Trump, Zelensky. Pat, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Mike. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good. I never heard your guest ever mention the fact that the American people voted to decrease their spending on foreign wars. I think his comments appear to be centered really in a paradigm where Biden's still president, and the U.S. as a democracy no longer wants to borrow $2 trillion a year to fund wars and other programs. So again, we're no longer in a world where the U.S. wants to be the police of the world. And Trump, I think, was crystal clear on this back in 2016. And the Europeans laughed at him and did really nothing meaningful about it. And so
how do you feel about that world, though? Because I get the sense that's the kind of world that our guest was alluding to. And I hear where you're coming from. What does that tell you about the world today, though? How do you feel in it?
Well, for me, it really doesn't matter how I feel about it. Like, change is always uncomfortable. It's the American people voted for this. I can't do anything about it. You know, there was a survey done recently in Europe, and one of the questions was that most Europeans felt Ukraine is not getting enough support from the West. And then the other question was, only a minority thought that their country should increase financial support. So, like, to live in a world where I have an opinion, but somebody else has to carry the water for my opinion, like that's not a good world to live in either, at least in this case for the American people.
Well, I guess I get where you're coming from on that, but I'll bring it back to this idea of isolationism, which is where I see us moving to carry out your thought. And I'm not sure isolationist policies are good in the long term. But that's just my opinion, sitting here on the Mike Farwell Show. How do you deal with a problem like Donald Trump? Do you ignore him? Do you fear him? Is there any sort of middle ground? Tim Kenyon is a professor in the Faculty of Humanities at Brock University, joins the program for a conversation. Tim, good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
I must ask, well, I couldn't resist your piece at the conversation, thoroughly enjoyed it, but I'm curious as to whether or not when you write something for the conversation, if it's similar to a newspaper and some editor puts on the headline, or do you choose it yourself?
An editor is involved, and so that was not my headline, but it was not a world away from what my headline would have been.
I ask, of course, Tim, because there is language in there not necessarily radio friendly, and I know that you're a professional enough to know that we'll stay away from BSer and filling in the actual blanks there. But why Donald Trump is a relentless BSer makes this irresistible to converse about. So I thank you for making the time. And to go back to kind of where I set this up, I mean, is it best for us to ignore Donald Trump? Should we be in fear of the statements seem to come, multiple times per day, and they seem to change as well from one statement to the next. How do we address a leader like Donald Trump?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that is why I wrote the piece. It goes back to a paper that I and a colleague of mine, Jennifer Saul, who's a prof actually at Waterloo, wrote talking about Trump and other authoritarian politicians as BSers, where that's a kind of a technical term, and it means language that is neither truth-telling nor lying. At least the liar is concerned enough about the truth to try to conceal it. And the BSer just doesn't care either way. And that really characterizes a lot of Trump's talk. That struck us as interesting because you would think that if you're BSing, you would try to hide the fact. And one of the things that really jumps out about the way Trump talks is that he advertises his BSing. He shows it like a peacock with its tail. Why would that work? And the answer is, basically, it works because it's a way of pitting one part of the audience against another. When you have a really polarized political situation, like certainly the United States does, increasingly like we do in Canada, BSing one audience in a really extravagant way, just bald-faced BSing, is a way of showing your base that you have a common enemy and that you hold that enemy in contempt. With Trump, we can't really ignore him. That would have been a great answer at this time last year or 2 years ago. And it actually worked really well in 2021 and so forth. The news had enough of Donald Trump. And one of the effects was that his own audience stopped being animated by the things that he said, because it's not the things he says that gets them excited. It's the fact that he makes other people angry when he says them. So, yeah, stopping paying attention would have been great, but you can't not pay attention to the president of the United States. I would say, the news story we just heard of Premier Ford on CNN saying nobody knows what Trump means anymore. It depends on what he gets up and eats in the morning. I think that's what we need to be able to address, to be able to say it's not what he eats, it's what he tweets. When Doug Ford says nobody knows what Donald Trump wants, I think that's false. It's just that what he wants has nothing to do with tariffs in this case, nothing to do with Canada being the 51st state. It has everything to do with showing his base that he is a strong man, that he can't be made to back down, and that people have to fear him and respect him and so forth. So it isn't random. He doesn't necessarily mean what he's saying when he says it, but it isn't random, and it isn't just, it also isn't unserious, right? The fact that he's BSing, it can be deadly serious.
So I find it interesting, Tim, that you have referenced a couple of times that this, quote unquote, works for Donald Trump, and his base cares not so much about what he's saying as the fact that it makes others angry. So does that then, by extension, mean that those who support Donald Trump know he's BSing and they just don't care?
Yes, absolutely. Or they know he's BSing and they do care, but they're not bothered by it. They care in the sense that they're happy to see him, quote unquote, triggering the libs or, making people's heads explode. They know that he's BSing. They recognize it, but they see themselves as in on the joke, right? How could you lie? How could you just tell bald-faced lies and not suffer a kind of political penalty? Well, the answer is if you have a large enough base who likes to see you lie to some other audience that they imagine is being upset by it, and they want to see those people upset. So it's kind of an audience participation thing. They get to see themselves as part of this ongoing project of dismaying their shared enemies.
So as we enter this era of Trump 2.0, a month, 5 weeks into it now since inauguration, Tim, would your advice based on what you have seen and heard from Donald Trump on this side of the border anyway, to be that we should have a healthy fear of what this man is saying and what he might do next?
Of course. I mean, this is the president of the most powerful country on earth, and the things that he says don't mean they don't mean very much at all at the point that they come out of his mouth. And the meanings that they take on depend so strongly on his perception of his image as those messages land with people. Remember, that whole 51st state thing wasn't even reported. The Associated Press report on that didn't even mention the 51st state comment when it first came out. It was only after Fox News ran with the story and Prime Minister Trudeau had to release this statement saying, no, it was just a joke. People started getting angry and frightened. Now, Trump started to double down on it. Did he mean it when he said it? Almost certainly not. It was just a throwaway line, one of many outrageous things that you say to outrage people. But he's been doubling down ever since because he sees that that's a way to establish his strongman credentials. And I think that's increasingly the way we have to start predicting what he does and why he does it.
Really important conversation, to be sure. And Tim, I thank you not only for the thought-provoking piece, but for keeping this radio-friendly for the conversation today. You're a good man.
My pleasure. Thanks, Mike.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Tim Kenyon is a professor in the Faculty of Humanities at Brock University. Yeah, Donald Trump is a relentless, quote-unquote, BSer. But here, the thing is, it works for him. So I wonder, from your perspective, how do you approach the problem that is Donald Trump? Do you just ignore him and tune him out, potentially, at your or our own peril? Or are you afraid? Because as Tim points out, this is the most powerful leader in the world. And I'll be blunt with you, from the get-go, I thought to myself, honestly, I mean, what kind of damage can possibly be wrought in the next 4 years? And he can't possibly mean the things that he said during the campaign. Well, 5-ish weeks in, okay. And I would say that I am not unafraid of Donald Trump at this point. He was, and I've said this a number of times, but described in my weekend newspaper as a madman. It's hard to argue that characterization. So how do you approach Donald Trump today? How does he make you feel? Do you want to just ignore him till he goes away in 4 years? If he goes away in 4 years? Are you afraid of what might come out of his mouth next, or what the next action on the part of the United States might be? Your voice always welcome on the Mike Farwell Show. 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Tim Kenyon is a professor in the Faculty of Humanities at Brock University. He points out that if we take every provocation from Donald Trump seriously, we're falling for the kind of flood the zone strategy as he continues to spew out outlandish claims as a form of distraction, right? Oh, shiny object. Oh, outlandish thing being said. Let's go over here and cover that or talk about that. But if we continue to shrug off Donald Trump's claims, we ignore the potential danger embedded within them. And it seems to me that the danger increases on a daily basis. I did wonder, I will not tell a lie, I did wonder up until yesterday whether or not he meant it this time when it comes to tariffs, which are in place as of today, as you well know, because previously we got a 1-month reprieve. And now here we are, March the 4th, and they are very much the tariffs in effect. So 'twas not a bluff after all. Let's go to the phones and hear from you on this. Millie, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. And how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Oh, I'm very well, thank you.
Good.
And I'd like to comment on Donald Trump.
Of course.
You know what we should do, like he just did on his apprentice? Mr. Trump, you're fired from Canada. Well, I'm sorry.
Well, if only it were that easy, Millie.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you something. He's nothing but a bully.
I agree with that.
He is a bully, and he wants everybody to fall in line with them. And people in the States should realize how many people are getting laid off, how many people are going to lose their homes, how many people are going to starve.
Those are all very good questions.
You know, and if we follow Donald Trump back to the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, what was he up to? Buying real estate.
Sure.
And renting out at a outrageous price and wouldn't rent to certain people. And what did he do to those 5 kids in New York? Got them charged, took out a full page. Those 5 kids that got charged with murder, and they didn't even do it.
Millie, listen, I hear where you're coming from on the personality that is now in the White House. The problem for us and the rest of the world is that he is now the most powerful leader in the world. And so I think we ignore him at our own peril. I don't disagree that he is a bully. Tens of millions of Americans, though, threw their support behind him in this most recent U.S. presidential election, and they continue to applaud every one of these maneuvers that he makes from the Oval Office. George, good morning.
Yeah, Mike, good morning. I've been really studying, Mike, the headspace of Trump over the last few weeks, few months. And I think what we need to do, even your guest was talking about this, the thing we have to do is we have to go after his base. His base have to hurt. They have to be calling their representatives and their governor. It has to get to a point where the base is yelling back at Trump that this is not working out. I don't think anything else, Mike, is going to work. Our tariffs have to be hard. We have to hit them hard. And they have to realize that Trump, even though they go along with his BS and everything, they have to start feeling the pain.
George, appreciate the call. And time will tell, won't it? But we're hearing, and I'm not going to claim to be an expert in this at all. We are working on lining up a guest for tomorrow morning that will help us better understand the impact of these tariffs, especially to Joe and Jane public like you and me. What does this mean for us? What does this mean at our dinner table, right? You can take the American booze off store shelves. You can increase the cost of electricity to the northeastern United States. You can shut that electricity off. I can go on and on, but that's somewhere in a supply chain. How does it trickle down to you and me and our daily lives? And the same for Americans, because I have heard analyses that suggest this is going to hurt Americans just as much as it's going to hurt Canadians. And when it starts hurting Americans and when inflation starts to increase again in the United States, you would expect that there is some sort of hue and cry of protest. But it's not going to happen tomorrow. For how long do we wait to see that impact in the United States and hear that hue and cry? That's what time will tell us. More calls right after this on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Received an email from Mary Jane to Mike at 570news.com. Mary Jane, do you mind if I call you MJ? Spider-Man called his Mary Jane MJ. We used to work with a Mary Jo around here. We called her MJ. We had a Sarah Jane over here, called her SJ. Mary Jane, can I call you MJ? MJ writes to Mike at 570news.com. Trump tariffs, the subject line. So eventually, MJ writes, this will blow up in his face when Americans suffer. How do you think he'll spin it so that he doesn't look like he was wrong to start this tariff war? Great question, MJ. And as I said before the break, only time will tell. But I suspect that you are right, that Americans will also suffer economically because we have $155 billion in counter tariffs lined up, right? We're going to get an update from the 570 News Center in about 90 seconds' time, right around the same time that Justin Trudeau is expected to speak to the media. I don't think he'll start right at 10:30 today, but we will keep you apprised of what the Prime Minister has to say. Doug Ford was already on CNN, so he was on NBC yesterday. He was on CNN this morning, and he is saying that Americans are going to be livid with these tariffs because Ontario and Canada are applying those countermeasures, and it will hit Americans in their pocketbooks as well. Just before the update in the 570 News Center, I said at the beginning of the show today, and we were unanimous in our support of the idea, the only option for regional council to fill the seat vacated by Rob Deutschman's resignation was to hold a by-election. Clearly, regional council was not paying attention or does not give a darn, because even though we unanimously agreed that a by-election should be held, regional council has instead decided to appoint the runner-up from more than 2 years ago. What a dreadful mistake you have made, regional council. The furthest thing from a democratic solution, in my opinion. We'll talk more about that as the day goes on. Right after this update from the 570 News Center, however, our Tuesday Tech Spotlight, first Tuesday of every month at 10:30, is next. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. On the first Tuesday of every month at 10:30, we do a little something we call the Tuesday Tech Spotlight, which allows us to shine a brighter light on one of those tech companies in our community. And today that company is MedInclude. Its technology lead there is Kemi Borisade, who joins the show. Kemi, good morning.
Good morning. Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you very much for making the time to tell us more about MedInclude. What problem is it that you're trying to solve with MedInclude?
So MedInclude is a tech startup based in Kitchener-Waterloo. MedInclude uses artificial intelligence, AI, to simplify complex medical jargon. So basically, simplifying medical instruction into layman's terms for people to be able to, for patients to be able to understand, and then also even providing different language options as well. So up to 12 language options for patients with language barrier to be able to understand as well. So yeah, that's what MedInclude does. How did you get involved in working with MedInclude? So really, first of all, I heard about like the awesome thing that MedInclude was trying to do, and I thought like it was really amazing. I myself, I am very interested in like AI, machine learning, data analytics, and it was really right up my alley. So when I heard that, because we know that AI is really like moving the world right now. So when I heard that this company was doing this amazing thing, I was like, no, I have to get on this. So really, like, it's the passion for wanting to use AI to just change the world, really. So, Kemi, does this really improve communications between a doctor and a patient, let's say? Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Because if you think of it, the doctors are trying to pass information across. Now, they can only pass it the way that they understand, which is using the medical jargon. So, from my experience, for example, I've gotten medical instruction before, and I've gone on Google to like search, like what does this refer to? And like going on the browser means like you go down a rabbit hole and you're seeing so many things that are so scary. And sometimes that's not even what the doctor is trying to pass across. But with a system like MedInclude, you're able to get what the doctor is trying to pass across. And even when we did like the pilot at 5 hospitals, one of we got like numbers, like for instance, we had 80% reduction in missed appointments, we had 65% reduction in translation costs, and even 89% patient satisfaction as well. So the numbers also like back up like what we're doing as well. So you're telling me that I should not refer to Dr. Google to figure things out, is that right? Yes, because I believe that if you were to, that's why I use myself as an example, right? You can go on Google, right? But then because the doctor that is giving you the medical instruction is not right there sitting down with you while you're browsing, you're just going to like come to conclusions by yourself, You come to the conclusions by yourself. So yes, that's where MedInclude like basically just breaks the barrier in communication between the doctor and the patient, or the doctor and the care provider of the patient. I know, Kemi, that MedInclude did a pre-commercialization project with Grand River Hospital to test the platform in a real-world setting. Can you share how that worked out? Oh, so that was like a great opportunity for MedInclude, partnering with one of the biggest hospitals in that region. The beautiful thing that came out of that was we were having like constant feedback from them. So the feedback they were giving us, this is how we think your system is doing right now. This is what we think you can do to improve it. So it really helped us, like, being able to get those feedback and even, like, being able to implement those feedback for them to see in real time as well. Like, okay, we're listening to your feedback. We're improving on it. And, they're also getting results as well. So I think even with Grand River, they would be able to, like, testify to the fact that MedInclude definitely shaped, the communication better for their patients.
What sorts of trends, Kemi, are you seeing in the medical technology space right now?
Right. So, as I said before, everyone is jumping on the AI wave, right? So there's a lot of, like, everyone is trying to, like, come up with, like, AI tools that are simply, like, translating notes. We see, for instance, like, even Microsoft as well is doing, like, AI tools that's constantly, trying to help doctors do their documentations faster, trying to help them even, like, come up with diagnosis as well. Because what MedInclude uses is called a large language model, which is basically like an ML tool that is used for understanding, like, human text, basically. So basically the machine is able to understand human text. So we feel like Microsoft and even a lot of other companies are jumping on the LLM wave as well, trying to just look for tools that can help doctors perform their tasks better, and even patient-centered, like, delivery as well.
Why here? Why build MedInclude in the region of Waterloo?
So one thing I would say is that our founder she's a alumni of the University of Waterloo, and University of Waterloo has been very instrumental in the success of MedInclude, from providing a lot of resources. I think she was a part of, like, the Velocity Incubator, so providing a lot of resources, to providing mentorship, to providing networking as well. So it only made sense to actually start there as well. And then it's also the tech ecosystem as well that has also helped our founder. And then, opportunities like this as well, to be able to talk about MedInclude to the world, is definitely a reason why we are based in Waterloo.
Yeah, the ecosystem here, I've heard from so many people, Kemi, is one that fosters innovation and collaboration. And we also have a hub like Communitech. What sort of support does Communitech offer? This right now, what we're doing right now is definitely as a function of Communitech. So Communitech has been very, very helpful for the success of MedInclude. They've provided resources. I know that they do, like, constant mentoring sessions as well. And trust me, sometimes, like, the sort of value that you get from mentoring, like, talking to people who have been there, so that you're not, they say, like, to tell you when you have an ugly baby kind of thing, right? So being able to talk to people who have been there, who would advise you and let you know, like, when you're taking the wrong step, I think sometimes that's even more valuable than any other thing that you can get. So I think, I believe that Communitech has been very, very, very helpful in that aspect, like providing resources and providing mentorship. And I think MedInclude is truly, truly grateful to Communitech for that. It is a really interesting story, and I'm so glad you could be on the show with us this morning to share it with us, Kemi. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah.
Kemi Borisade is the technology lead at MedInclude, again, sprung from the University of Waterloo, built here in the region, support from the tech ecosystem generally and Communitech as that hub specifically. And hey, how many times have you referred to Dr. Google to figure out what it was that ails you? Or when your doctor tells you what you have, and then you go to the Google to ask it for more information, and you end up so far down that rabbit hole, you think your death is imminent. Well, MedInclude, with the help of AI, improves communication between doctor and patient. That medical jargon is simplified, and it's done so in about a dozen languages already as well. Just another one of the startups making waves here in the medical technology sector in the region of Waterloo. Our focus on the Tuesday Tech Spotlight this month. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I had to share this with you. But my good friend and colleague at Kitchener Rangers games, Dave Schneider, who is the public address announcer at the Memorial Auditorium, right? You know that voice, you know that name, I know you do. And he brought with him to the Rangers game on Friday an old program, or really advertisement, I guess, for the new Waterloo Arena back in 1947. But forgetting all the hoopla in there about the elected aldermen, as we called them at the time, or the mayor, and them talking about what this arena means to the community, I could not get over the advertising that this booklet contained back in 1947. And one of the advertisements from a legendary local company told us, it spoke right to us today. How will I know today, or how can I control today my cost of living for tomorrow? This legendary local company offered us some guidance back in 1947 as to how to deal with the increasing costs of living. And in fact, maybe keep those costs in check. Your cost of living never should have gone up since 1947. I'll tell you what this legendary local company had to say back in 47 as to how we keep the cost of living under control. Coming up right after this, it's the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. So my friend and yours, Dave Schneider, who is not just a councillor in the city of Kitchener and a long-standing radio guy, he's also the public address announcer at the Kitchener Memorial Auditorium for Rangers games, and he loves hockey. He loves local. I think this is why Dave and I get along as well as we do. Also probably because he's one of the nicest human beings I've ever met. So he brings with him to the game on Friday night, and we're sitting around the media room at dinner, and he shares this pamphlet, this booklet with us. It's called The Puck, Waterloo Memorial Arena. And it was basically an advertisement for the arena, and showed some photos of the teams that played there, which at the time were the Waterloo Intermediate B and Junior C teams. And it was pretty cool. Like, the thing was in the shape of a puck, and you know, round pages, and you flip from page to page through this booklet with all this information. But I couldn't get past, I mean, it was fun looking back at some of the names, not only of elected officials, but of the hockey players. And I couldn't get over the advertisements that were contained in this booklet. Like right inside the front cover, Raymond's Nut Shops. Eat more nuts, the ad boldly proclaimed. And it goes on from there. But one page that stood out to me that I could not resist, because I think it still applies today. Every Canadian today is asking himself this question. And forgive the writers, this was 1947. There were no herselfs, okay? Every Canadian today is asking himself this question. How much more will it cost me to live tomorrow? I couldn't resist this page because this was 1947. This is almost 70 years ago. No, it's almost 80 years ago. Do the math, Farwell. Do the math. Almost 80 years ago. And this local company, the name of which you will know immediately, and I'll get to, was asking that same question. How much more will it cost me to live tomorrow? And here is how this company, very well known in this region decades ago, answered the question. If we all keep on resisting the temptation to try to get more than our fair share of available goods, if we continue to restrict our purchases to what we really need, if we keep on producing as much as we can at as low a price as we can, this might be my favorite. If we continue to support to the full our government's wise measures of control. That's right, the government had wise measures of control, and we should support them to the full. If we continue to walk the middle road, the road of moderation in all things, in our thinking, in our actions, and in our pleasures. If, as the House of Seagram has always suggested, we continue to think of tomorrow and practice moderation today. That way, living costs should not increase. The answer depends on us. Men who think of tomorrow practice moderation today, says the House of Seagram. Yes, one of the legendary local companies, Seagram Distillers, said in 1947, living costs should not increase if we all keep on resisting the temptation to try to get more, if we continue to restrict our purchases to what we really need, if we keep on producing as much as we can at as low a price as possible, if we support to the full our government's measurements of control, and if we continue to walk the middle road, the road of moderation, living costs should not increase. How much do you think living costs have increased since 1947 anyway? Just a little blast from the past on the Mike Farwell Show this morning. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Regional Council made it seem easy today when it voted on how to fill the seat vacated by Rob Deutschmann. He resigned his seat to run for provincial office. And when he resigned, that left the one of 4 Kitchener seats vacant on regional council. And I said at the beginning of the show today, and we agreed unanimously, that the easy answer is simply go and hold a by-election to determine who should fill that seat. Council didn't take much time to make its decision, but it didn't go in that direction. It decided instead to appoint the runner-up from the election more than 2 years ago. Because, you know, voters' minds haven't changed at all. We don't have a different outlook as to who we would like to see represent us on regional council. It's a strange one, in my opinion, and I've got nothing against the individual who's being appointed. I don't know how the vote from 2022 still stands today. At least the person who was the runner-up is interested. And now, of course, gets the leg up as an incumbent when the next municipal election rolls around in 2026. Not very democratic regional council, and extremely disappointing from where I'm sitting that you would choose to move in this direction. Might be something we want to talk about during our Talkback Hour today. Open lines from noon until 1. My inbox also continues to fill up with tariff thoughts and Donald Trump thoughts, which of course we can explore further between noon and 1 as well. However, this is the first Tuesday of the month. That's why we just finished our Tuesday Tech Spotlight. And something else we do on the first Tuesday of every month between 11 and noon, a full hour with our policing leaders, Regional Police Chief Mark Crowell, Staff Sergeant Scott Griffiths, who heads up the Traffic Services Unit, are both here to answer your policing questions. So if you've got a question about how we are policed, the next hour is your chance to have them answered. This is the Mike Farwell Show. It is the first Tuesday of the month, and that means we are joined in studio by a couple of our policing leaders in the community. Chief Mark Crowell sits across the studio desk from me. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Mike.
Have you warmed up since the weekend?
Feeling good, yeah.
Good, okay. Glad to hear that. And you're healthy, which is also a miracle considering how cold it was on Saturday.
Trying my best.
We'll talk more about that as the hour goes on. Staff Sergeant Scott Griffiths is with us as well. He heads up the Traffic Services Unit and also on the road to recovery. I mean, how long does it take one to warm up from plunging into a pool of freezing water on a day that it's like minus 15?
Well, certainly at my age, it takes a lot longer than Mark's or yours, but I'll say that. But I will say that the just listening to the Special Olympians and observing their courage warmed my heart. So it didn't take long.
I only got to see this vicariously through social media, and your courage, the both of you and all of the other members that took part in the annual polar plunge, your courage is also tremendous from where I'm sitting for sure. We will talk more about that as the hour goes on. And I'll remind you, of course, that you are welcome to have your policing questions answered, because that's why these two gentlemen make themselves accessible to us every month for this hour. Mark, I'll start with you because on the weekend we woke up, I think it was Sunday morning, to reports of shots fired into a home in Kitchener. And it strikes me as it's not the only recent story that police were involved in where a firearm was also involved. What can you tell us about the shots fired into the home in Kitchener and even generally what we're seeing by way of firearms in the community?
Sure. So that incident occurred on Benninger Drive, Kitchener. Well over a dozen shots fired into a home, and alarming for a residential community of any kind in our region. And that was a second shooting incident of a similar nature in 2025. So back on January 9th, there was another residence that had shots fired as well. So that is a trend that we've seen, targeted incidents to specific locations, sometimes in the still of the night. And, very alarming for individuals and neighborhoods involved. So for some context, last year we had 22 shootings in total in Waterloo region. Over the past 3 years, we've had 21 shooting incidents on average per year. And of the 5 homicides last year, 4 of them involved firearms. So it's one of our top concerns, as a community. And I think it's worth talking about at every occasion possible, because as we've agreed before, we can't allow it to become a commonplace that we just accept that this is something that happens. So we have put it at the top of our list for our crime suppression efforts, and happy to explain what that is. But, shootings in this region are amongst our most pressing concerns.
You talk about crime suppression, Mark, and I would like to, and I think we would appreciate a better understanding of what that looks like.
Yeah, so it's really, we've taken a evidence-driven approach, and we've looked across the world and certainly within North America of, how do you tackle these issues of the highest levels of violence, the people that are involved in the highest levels of victimization, the problem areas, the problem activities. And we've really re-engineered some of our teams to be really focused on evidence-driven practices, and as one service trying to have one conversation about those top things. And it might seem commonplace that every police service does that, but I can tell you, with so many investigations happening, so many calls for service every day, we need to be really diligent and unified with how we do our work. So it's something we've called a stratified policing plan, and it allows us to, as I mentioned, look at our top priorities: gun violence, robberies, break-and-enters, those types of things. And one thing that's of interest to the community was launched not long ago, something called the Provincial Firearms Bail Dashboard. And that's one tool of many, but allows our officers, as they're navigating their regular work, to be cognizant and aware of who in our community already has a history of firearms activity. And it could be people charged outside of our region that live here and are on bail conditions related to firearms offenses. Could be curfew, could be needing to adhere to any number of conditions. And this is the active conversation we've had within Canada and Ontario, is keeping people accountable. And we know that the top offenses are carried out by a very small number of people. And so if we focus our efforts in a very diligent, focused and effective way, we hope to drive down crime.
You mentioned that this is the second time already this year that this has happened, where shots in the still of the night fired into a home. We don't want it to become commonplace, but it sounds like this would be probably, because it's targeted, an act of intimidation of sorts. Are we connecting this to organized crime?
Absolutely. So when you strip almost all of these things back, it's exactly that. It's some sort of turmoil within relationships within networks of organized crime, typically drug trafficking activity. Sometimes it's a personal relationship issue between individuals or groups. By the end of the day, it's intimidation. But one bullet can go astray, and when you're firing multiple rounds into a residence, it's no mistake that the intent is not only to intimidate but to potentially hurt and kill someone. So we treat those as seriously as anything else. A shooting incident is a shooting incident. And so when we're looking at firearm activities, we are greatly concerned, and there's many strategies that we're taking to map out these investigations to hold people accountable.
Scott, a question I wanted to ask you today, because it came in over the past number of weeks from one of our listeners, and I like to make notes of these things for when the experts are here, but it was around vehicle lighting, particularly headlights, because it seems as though the newer LEDs appear brighter. I don't know if they actually are, but what does the Highway Traffic Act tell us about headlights and brightness?
So it's an interesting discussion, because we have two parts of this. One is the advent of new technology, such as LED lighting and automatic headlights, automatic high beam headlights and things like that, as well as like the regulatory part of it. So the regulatory, the headlights are regulated by federal motor vehicle safety standards. So there's a lengthy tome that describes the requirements, manufacturer requirements and build requirements for all the headlights that are installed in new motor vehicles, and further for replacement lights and so on and so forth. So there is a standard. There is a requirement that they have a maximum of 75,000 lumens and so on and so forth. But sometimes it's not only the manufactured standard that's of issue with people, it's the change from like the look of the halogen lights to the LED lights. So you have like a whiter light, a brighter light, a sharper light. So it does cause some concern to people. But I can assure you that obviously the Highway Traffic Act has regulations that refers back to the federal standards and says like you have to be able to operate with ones that meet standard. However, people have to be conscious that as new technologies have evolved, these headlights have become brighter, sharper. When we have automatic headlights where we have people's high beams going on and off automatically, sometimes that can cause a visual distraction to people because the people are actually manually manipulating. They're turning from high beam to low beam. They're letting the car do that work for them. So there's a lot of that to be considered. And obviously, and I do understand the feeling that certainly things have been brighter. And I would say there's likely an element of aftermarket items or aftermarket headlights that can be manufactured overseas or manufactured in a place where the regulatory standard doesn't apply to them, and they don't concern themselves with that. So people can always purchase things that are outside of the standard. It's just, for the most part, brand new cars. Reputable dealers of manufactured parts are going to provide those and keep to those standards.
And when it comes to customization, those lighting kits where there is a different color or something maybe that complements the color of your vehicle in the undercarriage is acceptable, if I'm not mistaken. It's just as long as it's not a distraction to other vehicles on the road?
Well, certainly, and if it has to meet the standards of the Highway Traffic Act. So if there's a certain prohibition for a visible color to the front, such as red and blue for police and emergency vehicles, then that's going to be prohibited if it can be viewed to the front or the back sort of thing. But if you have something as a means of decoration, and we talked about this in the Christmas light discussion, but it certainly is something that there is area for personalization, but we also have to be conscious of visual distractions and the ability for people to recognize emergency vehicles and so on and so forth.
Staff Sergeant Scott Griffiths heads up the Traffic Services Unit. Chief Mark Crowell is with us as well. It is your opportunity every month on this show to have your policing questions answered by our police leaders here on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Regional Police Chief Mark Crowell in studio with us alongside Staff Sergeant Scott Griffiths, who heads up the Traffic Services Unit. You can have your policing questions answered on a monthly basis, first Tuesday from 11 until noon, 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. Mark, just the other day we had a report from Regional Police about a carjacking, and it was a young person involved. I couldn't help but think of jewelry store robberies and the young people being involved. But along with the carjacking, too, we had the chop shop in North Dumfries, which police have infiltrated. When it comes to car thefts, and I know we've talked about this in the past, and last year was a particularly bad year, where are we at when it comes to car thefts in the region?
Yeah, I think context matters. So there was an increase in all of it last year. So if you just look at 2023, we had 977 motor vehicles stolen. There was about another 200 added in 2024. We were just under 1,200. And there was an increase in reprogramming thefts and attempted thefts. And then there was a doubling in carjacking incidents. And that's the theft or the robbery of a vehicle while somebody's approaching or actively in their vehicle. So those are a huge concern for us. You mentioned those recent incidents where we had, positive interventions. We arrested a 17-year-old male. He was tracked to Stratford, assistance to arrest him, and then 3 other individuals in that chop shop in North Dumfries. So we have a break, enter, and vehicle theft team that works with many other teams locally within our service, but also across the province. And so it's a multifaceted challenge for us. One thing I would draw our attention to is how we're intervening, disrupting, and solving these investigations. And a lot of the time it comes with automation and technology. So increasingly we're using camera networks from private citizens, from businesses, and license plate reader technology that's deployed on our vehicles as well allows us to track and to locate individuals, vehicles, and so on. So it is our plan, and it's part of a larger discussion for down the road, to increase capabilities with this type of technology, camera systems that we will have access to, camera systems that we will deploy, and also growing a network of license plate reader technology we believe will help to, look to solve, but also prevent some of this activity moving forward.
It seems to me that here we are again talking about a 17-year-old that may have been involved in a carjacking, again connecting to the jewelry store robberies. Yeah. Are there any conversations happening, Mark, between police chiefs and the federal government around potential changes to the Youth Criminal Justice Act?
I think it's always a conversation, but the most honest thing we can address is the notion that these young people are often being manipulated and used and times coerced into the investigation. So no one is off the hook, and accountability rests with every individual for what they do and what they get involved with. But there's no doubt that young men are being drawn into organized crime networks. They are being swept up into robberies, vehicle thefts, and the other carjackings and other related behavior. And so it's like everything we know about crime and everything you've seen in movies and television is, when you have a network of organized people, they are going to find ways to find gaps in issues within the system where they can break through, and young people get swept up into that. And they're carrying out the tough, violent work for people who are profiting immensely. And so it's like we're always trying to find the root cause of the problem. And so we have to address it at the highest level from an intelligence and organized crime standpoint, but we also need to intervene with these young folks to get them on a better path. And that's not just a police issue, that's an all of society issue.
Absolutely, no question. Scott, when it comes to one of the fatal four we talk about on our roads in this region, speeding is one of them. I know it remains a concern on our rural roads. What proactive steps are we taking as a police service to prevent and or enforce the speeds on rural roads?
Well, certainly it is a priority. Like there's a good portion of our major and fatal crashes last year were in rural townships, which are largely rural roads. So we certainly have a lot of concern about why these are happening and the types of behaviors that are causing that, speed being one of the major ones. So there's kind of a multifaceted approach for us. We have our rural officers who are very diligent in their enforcement work, but we also have our ability to process the complaints that we receive from the public through our complaints office with my sergeant here in traffic services. And then we are deploying both my officers in problem areas, or we have monthly traffic enforcement teams that are teams of officers who are seconded from the patrol divisions who are targeting complaint areas, specific areas that we have identified through that, as well as working in a partnership with our townships and cities for developing what we call a STEP program, a STEP list. So that's a selective traffic enforcement program where the cities are providing us with evidence-based locations where they have concerns and they would like attention be given to those parts for enforcement, and we're actively engaging in enforcement in those locations as well. And we communicate regularly about that, so the list is not just created one time and it just sits there. It's a live document. So if there's a new area that pops up as a concern for certain communities, it's going to be included in that list, and then we subsequently inform and instruct our officers to engage in enforcement in there.
We hear this from elected officials all the time, that speeding in neighborhoods is the most common complaint that they hear. I suspect, Scott, this would be a situation where there could never be enough resources. I mean, you could probably be on, dozens of roads every single day. So how do you manage deployment of those resources? So
we certainly try to use an evidence-based approach where we're looking at not only the number of complaints we receive, but also if there's any evidence behind that. So again, going back to our partnership with the cities and townships, whether we have traffic data from those people who are providing us information about whether this area is, and I hesitate to say that every area is a problem, because sometimes it's a matter of perception or a matter of how you view your community. If we have, a certain number of vehicles going through every day that are problematic, then certainly that's a problem. But if we are just kind of doing on an anecdotal basis then we're not really answering, we're not really solving things as effectively as we can. So we use the information from the cities, as well as we have our own traffic study device that we deploy when we receive a complaint in certain areas. We determine if it's something that, if it's a new area or an area that we've received multiple complaints about and there's no data on, we have the ability to deploy essentially an anonymous data gathering device that will be able to register and tell us the actual count of vehicles on that roadway, the average speeds, whether or not there's a time of day that is particularly good for enforcement, if there is an issue with speeding, and what we can do about that, so that we're not just throwing resources at anything, because unfortunately we can't. We have to be thoughtful and educated and kind of conscientious in the way that we send our officers out and ask them to do. And I think the public would expect us to not, we don't want to be there when the problem, it doesn't exist. We want to be there when the problem's occurring. So that's what we're trying to do in earnest. And we certainly, you hit the nail on the head. I wish I had enough officers to put somebody everywhere all the time, but unfortunately we can't.
Scott Griffiths is the staff sergeant that heads up our traffic services unit. Regional Police Chief Mark Crowell in studio with us as well. Your policing questions answered this morning on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Today is the day you get your policing questions answered. Regional Police Chief Mark Crowell, Staff Sergeant Scott Griffiths, who heads up our traffic services unit, in studio with us on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio. On the first Tuesday of every month, between 11 and noon, we have our policing leaders in studio with us. Regional Police Chief Mark Crowell, Staff Sergeant Scott Griffiths, who heads up the traffic services unit. They are here to answer your policing questions. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. I'll get to the phones in just a moment, and there's still a line if you'd like to be a part of it. But Mark, I think I would be remiss if I didn't ask, since we have flipped a calendar to the month of March. I know March brings about an event that many in the community, and I will include myself in that many, wish didn't happen, but police have to prepare for. So now that we're into March, are we ready for March the 17th and St. Paddy's Day in the University District?
Yeah, we are ready, and we'll always be ready. It's something we've had to come to plan for on an annual basis. And in the past couple of years, we've seen, since coming out of the pandemic, the resurgence of the crowds that gather for the unsanctioned event. So we continue to learn every year on how to plan and how to deploy. So we have been working in the past number of months with all of our stakeholders, emergency responders, City of Waterloo, University, and so on planning for this year. And it's interesting because St. Patrick's Day is on Monday the 17th, but we have to plan for an operational period that also covers the weekend. So from a risk mitigation standpoint, that causes us additional costs. It costs a burden on our community in terms of the coverage that is required and then the risk of the behavior itself. So we're still in that planning stage, and we don't typically release our operational details before it occurs, but we're certainly ready, and our partners are ready with us.
I feel like I let the genie out of the bottle by talking about it on March the 4th. It's a good thing university students don't listen to AM radio, right? So pretend you didn't hear that.
Very good.
Okay. All right. Let's get to the phones, hear from you so you can have your policing questions answered today. Greg, you're up first. Good morning.
Okay. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Just first comment and question. Just a couple things that would be minor infractions, but I do delivery work in Elmira, and on a daily basis, I see that, the bus route, there's all kinds of stops going up and down Arth is the main thing. And I think 95% of the people don't realize that, I don't know how many years it's been in place, that you got to yield when the bus is ready to come back in. There's times where I may be 10th in line. I can see the bus. There's a signal. He's ready to go. And 1, 2, 3. It takes me to finally give him room. And I just wondered, if you guys saw that, is that really something you'd pull someone over for? Or is that just too minor to have time? I'm sure it frustrates bus drivers, but it happens in other cities. And that was just one thing. Like I say, I know there's lack of resources, maybe not worth putting in there. But if ever you chose to and want to see what I'm talking about, daily basis, long lineups of traffic, because there's so many traffic lights that cause the lineups. And often there's a bus stop. They're ready partway through when the light turns green. And, I think everyone's oblivious that that's a law, I would say.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Thanks for the call. It's certainly something that it is an infraction. So when the bus signals to rejoin the roadway or rejoin the travel portion of the road after picking up a passenger, you are to yield to let that bus enter. So it is an offense. If officers are witnessing it, they should be intervening and should be laying charges if appropriate in that situation. And it just makes sense because if you have vehicles that have it to encroach onto the oncoming lanes in order to get around the bus, or you have people who are sort of squeezing up around them on the side, the opportunity for a collision or opportunity for further delay is just going to exist there. So we would ask everybody to just be kind to our GRT operators when they are picking up passengers and then signaling to join back onto the roadway to let them in as is required by law. So we're certainly interested in enforcing that, and I'll make sure that our rural officers are well aware of that. And I'm sure Arthur Street's a real pain point sometimes, so it's something that I'm sure they're aware of too.
Wait till we get the bypass done. Well, that'll be great. But, Scott, this, I think, comes back to two things that you would always be looking for on the roads. If I go back to the Fatal Four, speed and distracted driving. Now, not necessarily that you're speeding down Arthur Street, but everybody seems to be in such a hurry. Remember, those buses are out there trying to move people too. And you might not be looking at your phone so distracted, but be aware of the surroundings that you're in while you're operating a motor vehicle and recognize, hey, the bus does need to get back in here.
Absolutely. And we're looking, everyone's looking down the road. Everyone wants to get to their location as fast as possible. But we also have to be conscious of everything else around us, the other road users that we've talked about. And buses are them. And buses are taking cars off the road because those are passengers who would otherwise have to use a vehicle to drive. So we need your assistance to kind of ensure the orderly flow of traffic there.
All right. Greg, thanks for raising the issue and giving us a chance to talk about it. Fief, you are next. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Now, my question is, I do delivery, Uber, Skip, Instacart, and all those guys, and they give orders on the phone, right? So we have to, accept them. Now, what's your, take on that, basically?
Well, thanks for the call and thanks for all the hard work you do. I'm sure you are rescuing a lot of people from different needs daily. So you're not allowed to use a handheld device while operating a motor vehicle, but there are exemptions if it's placed in a hands-free mode and placed on a mount that's on your vehicle. So you see a lot of vehicles that have the hands-free mount that is mounted on your dash in your a vent or on the side of to the side of your steering wheel. And if you are accepting or something, pressing a button to be directed somewhere, you're able to do that. But you cannot be holding it in your hand. You cannot be using it to assist you. You cannot be doing all of your work on the phone while you're driving. So if you're driving along and there's a notification and you have to acknowledge or you have to press it to get directions for where you're doing with your GPS system, then you're able to do that. But you can't be doing any other work, especially if it's not on a mount and not in a hands-free mode.
This has got to be a bit of a nightmarish gray area, doesn't it, Scott, for officers who are watching for this sort of behavior, what might be happening on that screen? I find even the onboard maps can be distracting enough. And I don't know, it just seems that there's a lot competing for our attention in the cockpit of a vehicle.
Absolutely. And there's lots of different ways in which it's done. And there are exemptions under the Highway Traffic Act for a majority of what we're talking about, the in-dash navigation or making hands-free calls or things like that. Unfortunately, our officers are finding plenty of the other type of violations, so that we have so much work on that end that some of this stuff is not really as concerning, because we have people who are texting, videoing, doing other things like that they really shouldn't be with handheld. And it's like we need to get people to get them out of their hands, get them away from them, where they can focus on the road and focus on their driving.
Mark, in connection to the big story of the day and Donald Trump's tariffs, when all this began, it was about improvements at the border for illegal migrants and illegal drugs. I know Canada has made investments in that regard to try to crack down, and I'm not getting into Mexico versus Canada and how much, but we have made investments here on this side of the border to crack down on the illegal drug trade. Does any of that funding flow down to the region of Waterloo and our police service to help combat fentanyl, other opioids, other drugs on the streets?
So as of yet, not directly to the Waterloo Regional Police, but when you look at the network of public safety and policing and how it all works together, it's one of the turmoil that we're facing right now as a nation. I would say it's one positive thing where in crisis and chaos, we're finding commonality to come together to look at border security, look at the investments we've made as a nation, looking at the flow of in and out. And so working with the RCMP, OPP, Canadian Border Service Agency, that work is happening. We're connected on a regular basis. And just to remind ourselves, we have one of the busiest and fastest growing airports in Canada, in our region. So in terms of people flowing in and out and commercial traffic of things coming in and out of that airport, it's an area of interest to us where we need to look at how do we monitor that as a community. That's our collective responsibility with those partners that I've named. And we're also looking at the emergence of technology. So there's no helicopter provided to WRPS, but how do we look at remotely piloted aerial vehicles and systems, so drone technology and how that's emerging to help public safety broadly. So those are the things that are happening on an ongoing basis.
Regional Police Chief Mark Crowell, Staff Sergeant Scott Griffiths, who heads up the Traffic Services Unit, in studio with us this morning. It's Ask the Chief on the Mike Farwell Show, where you get your policing questions answered. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Crowell, Staff Sergeant Scott Griffiths, he heads up the Traffic Services Unit. Your chance to have policing questions answered directly from our police leaders. Let's get back to the phones. Richard, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm just curious. What's the time between having to calibrate radar guns?
Like before and after a traffic stop? Is that what you mean?
Like how often do they have to be calibrated?
Well, an officer will test the device prior to its use, and then after each and every traffic stop that occurs.
Okay, and how's that done?
Well, it depends on the device that we're talking about. So we have multiple types of devices, but typically there's a function button that does a test, an internal test, a visual test, as well as a tone for the speed, because you'll hear a sound when a certain speed comes out. And then we do tests for interference and tests for any sort of obstructions that may occur. So we're doing a function test, a use test, and a display test.
Okay. And is this test also done on the radar cameras that are used in the Waterloo region?
You mean the automatic speed enforcement cameras?
Yes.
I'm not an expert in that, sir, unfortunately, Richard. It's something that I'm sure that there is a standard for calibration and a standard for maintenance on them, but I wouldn't be familiar with that, unfortunately. It's a regional responsibility.
Okay.
You get a ticket, Richard?
No, I'm just trying to figure out if the police have to calibrate them every so often, are these cameras being calibrated?
Gotcha. It's a good question. Everybody's concerned with automated speed enforcement, but that's what I love about this segment. I never once thought about how often you would be calibrating or recalibrating, testing these cameras. So there you go. Richard, thanks for the question. Let's go next to Kyle. Kyle, good morning.
Good morning, good afternoon, guys. I got a question for you. It's a two-part question, but it's in the same subject. The first one is I was at the mall on Saturday, noticed there's a couple of police officers just floating around, because of obviously, the situations we've had with the jewelry store robberies. And so I was just wondering, are we putting more emphasis on that now? I guess, like the same type of police officers that are in sporting events. I forget what that specific name is called. And the second one is have we seen a decrease in jewelry store robberies over the course of, let's say, a couple of months, or is that something you can't answer because it's an ongoing investigation? You can't. I totally understand. I just thought I'd ask. Thanks, guys. All
right, Kyle, appreciate that.
Thanks, Kyle. And yeah, so we have been working very openly with, mall ownership. So picture our region. We've got three large malls, Cambridge, Kitchener, Waterloo. And we've been trying to coordinate our efforts with the mall ownership, management, store security, and really to put an emphasis on safety for everyone. Visibility matters. And so when we look at jewelry store robberies in 2024, there were 9 in total. And in 2025, there's been 4 attempted robberies. I believe they've all been at Conestoga Mall, where we've been able to intervene and thwart. And the effectiveness there is that we've worked with the security and the store staff, and we've been really diligent about awareness in terms of what to look for. So as people have entered in the parking lots in vehicles, as they've emerged in groups, masked, hooded, carrying duffel bags, hammers, crowbars, whatever it is, it's actually been a quick notification and a quick notification to the actual store within the mall. And we've been able to intervene. We've arrested a number of individuals. So visibility matters, and our officers are very busy with so many pressing needs across the community. But crime prevention takes many forms, and sometimes it's the visible officers that you will see situated in places of concern and issue. And other times there's undercover officers in different forms as well. And so that's a lot of work going into this. And there's the ongoing prevention work, and there's also actively pursuing people we know to be involved in criminal behavior, such as vehicle thefts, robberies, and so on. So there's always a coordinated effort. And I mentioned crime suppression earlier. We're trying to be as coordinated and evidence-focused as possible to know who's doing what and to prevent it whatever we can.
Kyle, appreciate that question. I know those robberies are on the minds of many, for sure. Darcy, good morning. You're on with Regional Police Chief Crowell and Staff Griffiths.
Yeah, hey, how's it going today?
Good, thanks.
Excellent. And then, I had a question for the chief.
Go ahead, Darcy.
Chief,
yeah.
I'm trying to do my landlord tenant act stolen vehicles and loss report. I refuse to do the general lease store in the Holy Cross until police do police reports. It's been, 20 years now? 30 years? You know what my vehicles are. Can I please get them back?
Yeah, I kind of made out what Darcy, it sounds like Darcy has a very individual request. So what I would suggest, I can provide our contact information and maybe we can reach Darcy and we could take the conversation offline and try and work through his issues and concerns. It sounds like a long-standing issue.
It certainly does, 20, 30 years. Were you even born yet?
Oh, come on.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will. Tom, ask the chief, over to you. Good morning. Hi, Tom. And Tom has disappeared, which is fine because I wanted to talk to the both of you about what you did on the weekend. I alluded to this at the start of the show today, and just as we wind things down, I know you do this on an annual basis, and I'm always grateful that I end up being on the road with the Kitchener Rangers so I don't get roped in to any of this in any way, because I would never do it. But I saw some coverage, Mark, after the fact of you uniformed, talking to the media, and I thought, yeah, just like the chief. He's there, he's got a presence, he's answering questions from the media, and people like Scott are jumping into the water. But no, then there you were too, full on, not just dipping your toe in, fully uniformed. This is all in support of Special Olympics, but tell us about the annual polar plunge this weekend.
It was great. It was a cold day.
It was.
And true confession that we have had warmer years than others, and this was one of the cold ones. But this is one of our most important partnerships, and we're honored to support Special Olympics Ontario and our local athletes. So this is the annual polar plunge. This year we had close to 150 plungers, all walks of life from around the region. And we raised $36,000 plus for the occasion. So I have, for a number of years, tried to kick it off because I want to get it over with. And I get to, play that card. But it's a lot of fun. And it's a moment in time where, you take that cold plunge, but great event and a lot of just fun, good times, great costumes. But it's all about the athletes at the end of the day. The courage that they show, as Scott said earlier, every day in what they do inspires us. So if we can give back in any way to support their work, it's win-win.
Even Ron Caudle, the Codfather, passed the torch to another generation this year, but the Caudles were still involved. Scott, are you contractually obligated to do this? Do you get deranked if you don't? Why?
No, there is no obligation to do so. But I've always fancied myself a bit of an Olympian. But I have to surround myself with actual Olympians in order to feel that way. So, very happy to do it. I think it's like I said before, it's an incredibly fulfilling opportunity to sort of see and speak and experience and see Special Olympians, raising money, and to be able to interact with them and to understand all of the work that they put in. I can give a little bit of my time, and I can give myself a little bit of a chill once a year just in support of that. And Mark's being very modest because before he went in, they were cracking the layer of ice off the top of the water. So
I can't even.
He was our test subject. So he survived. I can do it.
I enjoyed watching it from the comfort of my home on social media. Kudos to you and all the members that took part, and $36,000 raised. That's nothing to sneeze at for sure. Just like that, we're out of time. Thank you both, as always, for being here, answering the policing questions for the community.
Thank you, Mike.
Take care, Mike.
Regional Police Chief Mark Crowell, Staff Sergeant Scott Griffiths with us on the Mike Farwell Show this morning. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. You remember when you were a kid and your parents would say something along the lines of, "Don't you talk back to me"? I used to get that a lot. Why do you think that might be? You get the chance, though, to talk back every day on this show. We've got tariffs. It is a Tariff Tuesday. The Prime Minister of Canada says the United States has launched a trade war against us, and we are fighting back. That and anything else on your mind as we open up the phones for the Talkback Hour right after this update from the 570 News Center. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio. Well, I think we have a couple of big issues to talk about. One is almost, I won't say global, but it's definitely international. And when you consider Donald Trump and his behavior since his second term in the Oval Office began, this could well be global, but it impacts us locally. That, of course, being the tariffs, which are in place as of today, and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau saying that the U.S. has started a trade war and we will retaliate. So, yes, even though this is an issue that emanates from Washington, it has an impact on us locally. And then right here at home, you can let us know what you think about Regional Council's decision to appoint the runner-up to fill a vacant seat on Regional Council. It is the least democratic option that Council could have chosen, in my opinion, and yet it went in that direction. Not a fan of the choice at all. Just a couple of things from where I'm sitting today. Wherever it is you are, happy to hear what you're thinking about those things or something else happening that's important to you. Because if it's important to you, it's important to us. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. You would have heard Matt say in that update from the 570 News Center that Ontario Premier Doug Ford is expected to respond to the tariffs later today. But as you well know, he has already been responding, including at a luncheon yesterday.
You have two choices here, folks. We roll over as a country and just let them run over us, or we fight like hell, like we've never fought before. I'm taking option two. I'm fighting like hell, and we're going to protect Canada. He's underestimating the Canadian people, the resilience of the Canadian people, and the strength of the Canadian people. I can't, for the life of me, figure out why this guy's attacking his closest neighbors, allies, and friends. A tariff on Canada is a tax on Americans. And I'm going to repeat that on NBC, CNN, Fox News, CNBC. I'm going to be hammering the airwaves to get that message to the Americans. They're going to get hurt. It's the wrong decision. But if they want to try to annihilate Ontario, I will do everything, including cut off their energy, with a smile on my face.
I'll cut off their energy with a smile on my face, says Ontario Premier Doug Ford. Let's go to the phones. Tom, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. How are you doing?
Good, thanks.
Well, okay, so let's talk about the big elephant in the room here is that I think, first of all, I think Doug Ford needs to reconvene Queen's Park. I think that needs to get done so he can actually put his mandate now out there and have all the political parties in Queen's Park to talk about what they're going to do. Bankruptcies will go up. And this is my concern with the bankruptcies. If people are going to start losing their jobs and people who have a part-time job may start losing some type of source of income, the banks could be a little smarter and not helping people who are having a difficult time making payments on mortgages, on credit cards, on car payments, so on and so forth. Getting something is better than nothing. Like, we got to be smart about this as well, because someone goes bankrupt and starts losing a house or losing a car or losing some way of some type of source of income. It's not helping them by going bankrupt. So we got to look about this. I got a couple points here. Trump borrowed money from the Russians in 1990 when he went bankrupt. It was good in 1990. He got his money from Russia to pay for some of his bankruptcies. So that's probably one of the reasons why he's indebted, or feels that he has to bend the knee to Putin. But this is just, I can't believe this is happening in 2025 here. He did say something about economic wars, and this is what we're in. We're in an economic war right now. And hopefully the American people, whether they're pro-Republican or pro-Democrat, might realize something as well. If they want to protest something now, take a page out of what they do over in Europe, and that's how you protest. But march on Washington now. This is what you need to do. Talk to you later, Mike. Bye.
All right, Tom, appreciate that. It really does astound me that in 2025 we are here, some 40 years after signing free trade. And remember, please remember that in 2016, when Donald Trump was the president of the United States, in that first term, he negotiated the existing free trade agreement between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. So clearly, the man's word means nothing to him. Treaties and deals mean nothing to him, at least not anymore. And then he'll do something today, and how long will that last for? I don't know. But it was Donald Trump himself who was in the Oval Office when the United States, Mexico, Canada free trade agreement was updated. And here we are today. Dave, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. Two quick items. On the first one, I guess I'm in the minority. I disagree with you, but agree with Regional Council in regards to the action they took on the empty seat.
Why do you want the runner-up appointed, Dave? Why don't you want a by-election, which is the most democratic way to do it, in my opinion?
Well, the way I look at it is it really doesn't affect me personally anyways, but I look at it that we'll see what the percentage of voters actually show up and vote on the next election. Because I have a feeling it'll be business as usual, be in the high 30s or low 40s percentage of voters that show up. So I'll just leave that aside and talk on the second item quickly, and that is on the U.S. and Trump. I'm usually do watch it, and I'll watch it again. It's just an interesting. I watch the president's address to Congress, and I'll tape it. I'll actually tape it. I won't watch it, and I'll watch it tomorrow morning on how he addresses all these various issues and how the people respond afterwards. Their little groups afterwards, and that I will pay attention to. But in regards to Trump himself and what he does and everything, I do not pay attention. I do not pay attention to U.S. news. And that's all I have to say, and have a great day. All right, Dave, you have a great day, too, as we continue our 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. If it's on your mind, get it onto the air. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. U.S. television networks yesterday. He was on CNN this morning, and last evening he was on NBC's Nightly News.
Canadians are resilient, we're strong, we're proud, and we're going to fight back like they've never seen before. And I'm sorry to the American people that your president has decided to do this. I apologize, but he's giving us no choice. I don't want to respond, but we will respond like they've never seen before. You need our uranium, you need our potash, you need our high-grade nickel. I will stockpile our high-grade nickel at 50% of your military and manufacturing needs. Your aluminum, the steel, the lumber. It will be an absolute disaster. And this is all due to one person, that's President Trump. I have talked to endless governors, Republican governors and Democrats, senators and Congress people. I love the U.S. I lived there for 20 years. They're all saying this is the craziest thing that someone could ever do.
And yet, It has been done. Booze, by the way, American booze, being pulled from the shelves of LCBO outlets. One of our intrepid reporters checking out the local LCBO near our station here on Ira Needles. Already shelves being emptied of that American booze. So the governor of Kentucky can wail all he wants. Canada is, and Ontario is, retaliating. We are in the midst of, we have begun now, a trade war. And of course, right here in the region, we have decided that democracy can just wilt a little bit further on the vine, because in order to replace a seat vacated by the resignation of a regional councillor, our regional council met this morning and decided to appoint the runner-up from an election that happened more than 2 years ago. It just, if you don't laugh, you'll cry. Back to the phones on this Talkback Hour. Thomas, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Good. So my thoughts on the Trump tariffs, at least, this is coming from a younger person. I'm turning 19 soon. So this is coming from somebody who's younger, different audience. But my thoughts on this is that it's just rash. It doesn't make sense, and it's just going to affect both countries worse than... It's just going to affect both countries in a bad way. And it's also just going to lower the whole, integrity of the U.S. as well to other allies, especially.
Thomas, I appreciate having your perspective as a younger person on our show. Don't be a stranger, okay?
All right, take care.
Thanks very much for the call. Look, a lot remains to be determined, but there is no doubt at all that this is going to have a negative impact on the American economy as well. And how Donald Trump spins that when the impacts begin being felt by American citizens, I have no idea. Grant, good afternoon.
Good afternoon there, Mr. Mike. Oh, you're not laughing with me. Oh.
I'm just listening to you laugh, Grant, and enjoying the sound of your laughter.
Okay, I'm going to touch on three things. That meeting with Zelensky and Trump, and then I guess that was the vice president, right? There was...
Yeah, J.D. Vance, the vice president, was there too.
Yeah, I think if I was Zelensky, I would have told to shove it where the sun doesn't shine.
Whoa. You are fiery on the phone, eh? Would you really say that to his face, though?
Yeah, because he's a goofball.
Okay. The vice president of the United States is a goofball.
And it's sad about that girl from Mexico, the 11-year-old girl that was bullied and, the committed suicide. And then you got a new person that's answering the phone, Jen. She sounds like a sweet girl / woman.
All right, Grant. I would thank you very much for the call. The jury is still out on that. I just met Jen yesterday. I refuse to rush to judgment, okay? Except on you, Regional Council. I'm rushing to judgment on you and your undemocratic decision today to appoint the runner-up. You know what the runner-up is? Can we put this another way? Would you mind? Can I have 2 liters of pop? Let me put this another way. The runner-up is the first loser, okay? And you're just appointing the first loser to a seat on Regional Council. It doesn't make any sense. But maybe that's just me. Your Talkback Hour continues. And for those of you who love to call at star 570, don't do that today because the line's all mucked up. So 519-570-2545. 519-570-2545 or 1-800-570-5715. We'll get you fixed up right quick. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Right back to the phones we go on this Talkback Hour this afternoon. George, good afternoon.
Yes, Mike, good afternoon. I want to let you know that I'm very happy Waterloo Regional Council did what they did, and here's why. I'm in Cambridge. I can hardly even afford to pay my property taxes. They want to spend $800,000 to find and do a new voting so that 25 to 30% of people show up. And on top of that, Matt Rodriguez was probably going to win anyway. So, no, I'm happy they did what they did. We can't afford it anymore.
George, appreciate the sentiment. And listen, you're not going to get an argument from me when it comes to dollars and cents and where to save. The thing for me is this is not a place that you cut corners. This is the bedrock of our democracy, free and fair elections. We get to participate in those votes. And yes, only 20 to 25% of us show up municipally. And that's a terrible thing. But that's also a poor excuse then to push back against democracy. I'll remind you that Waterloo Council found $2.9 million to buy property. It was a good choice, in my opinion, to convert a former church into what eventually will be housing. You'll find the money. If you want to spend my money, spend it on something as important as this. Forget all the frivolous things that you want, which is what I worry about when we get 9.5% tax increases. These are things that we need. Our democracy needs to be upheld. And in my opinion, in a case like this, it's not being upheld. Mike, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. I'd just like to comment on this Trump tariff situation.
I got about 60 seconds. Please go ahead.
Okay. So what I'm seeing here, Mike, is Canada has itself let itself become vulnerable. We haven't spent money on defense. We have gone into these free trade agreements, and all you have to do is look at the region of Waterloo, what businesses have closed over the years. Labatt, Seagram's, Lear Siegler, Lazy Boy, Unirock Goodrich. And you can go on to Kaufman and Greb Shoes, Inglis Appliances. All our manufacturing base was destroyed by these free trade agreements, and these have left us vulnerable. That's my thoughts, Mike.
All right, Mike, I appreciate that. Look, I've been thinking back on that quite a bit too. Revisionist history, perhaps, because free trade was negotiated about 40 years ago now. And it is a much different place. I will say the world is a much different place because of it. And Mike's not wrong. It absolutely cost us. I think we have gained more than we have lost on the whole over these decades. But to Mike's point, I think we have also become far too complacent as a country, and now we're paying a pretty steep price for it. The Talkback Hour continues here on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Every day from noon until 1, we open the phone lines so we can hear from you directly during our 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. Love to get your thoughts on various issues. Jason, continue for us. Good afternoon.
G'day, Mike. Where to start? There are so many conundrums happening in the world, in our country, in the province. But I just want to touch upon something you mentioned yesterday. You were talking about earlier in the show about the the strike by the outdoor workers up in the region of Waterloo, and how when their the next proposal came, it was half of what originally, I think you had said, the wages or the increase was half of what they originally thought they were going to get. And then you said, well, they should have just taken the money. And anybody who's not familiar with the bargaining process, to be honest with you, money obviously plays a big factor in bargaining, but it's not, I don't think it's the major thing. Pensions, which are money, holidays, vacations, benefits are all money related, and those are big cores of it. But at the end, it's the language, making sure the language protects the workers. That takes up the most time. And so, money's usually, in my experience, money is one of the last few things that we ever deal with when we're in the bargaining process. And you also mentioned, Mike, about, having considering them essential workers. I will tell you, from a healthcare worker who doesn't have the right to strike, I wish we had that right, because we wouldn't be slapped with whatever our employer and or the government thinks that we're worth that 2 or 3 year period where 1.5% or 2%, where we have no choice. We have to suck it up and take either what we bargained with the employer, or we face the threat of going to arbitration and getting, being awarded whatever, or being having stuff taken away from us by the arbitrator. So, as much as people want more employees being mandatory, I think we need that power as workers to keep employers and governments also accountable and to respect us for what workers do out there.
I understand that, Jason, for sure. A couple of things, though, quickly. First of all, you recognize that not every employee is a union employee, so we get what the company gives us no matter what. And I recognize that's apples and oranges, but for many people, probably half, they aren't in union shops, so they just get what they get, and they either find a new job or they just take what the company gives them. But to your point on essential, and I fully get it. Like, if you are union and you can collectively bargain, but essentially some of the influence that you have is taken away because you're declared essential. What about, though, like Joe and Jane Public here in the region of Waterloo right now, who has to suffer because of lost services that they've paid for?
You know what? I'm not saying there isn't, disruptions and pain for the overall community. I think a lot of the time is that, the hope is that the community, will put more pressure on the employer, because they can't put the pressure on the union to negotiate, but they can put pressure on the region and or the city and or whomever that they receive their services from. So I understand, it's definitely, the mail strike inconvenienced us all. Various times over my life, there's been times where, again, the liquor store was on strike or the beer store was out on strike, and those are minor details. But at the end of the day, the hope is that political pressure is put on employers, specifically now it's the region, that say, hey, you need to settle, you need to bargain with these members because this is disrupting my life. And you're right, I'm not going to argue that every job should be considered essential, because they're not. And the ones that are actually considered essential, again, like healthcare workers, we don't have the right to strike. And so, if we want to take a greater lens of what's essential and what's not, I think this is the opportunity to do that.
Really appreciate the call and the conversation, Jay. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Take care.
You too. And we can have a back and forth and share different ideas. Of course, if the LCBO or the beer store is on strike, I would not argue that's essential, as much as I love my beer, right? But I do struggle with the idea of people whose job it is to serve the public servant, being on strike. And as far as the outdoor workers strike goes right now in the region, we don't have a ton of detail, but what the union has made clear is this is about money. So that's what we're going on. But I look forward to learning more, and I look forward to these folks earning a contract that they are happy with, for sure. Tom, you're on the Talkback Hour. Good afternoon. Hi.
How are you?
Oh, I'm good.
First of all, they say we have so many allies. We got nobody.
We got nobody? Nobody likes us, Tom?
One more time. Neither England nor France stood up to Trump, say, what are you doing to Canada? First of all, it's a different, you heard the news today, it's a different reality now. First of all, you got to get rid of the 100,000 Ukrainians out, and you got 5 million Indian illegals in the country. You got to get them out. We can't afford it. So that's the only thing.
Okay. That's the only thing, says Tom. Got an email here from Sue to Mike at 570news.com. Subject line, runner-up. Mike, I loves you, but does a silver medalist not get gold when the gold place winner is ousted? Oh, Sue, an excellent point made by you. First of all, is the silver medalist not the first loser? Yes, and I say that as never having won a silver medal, and I would be thrilled with one. But you're still the first loser. Secondly, the gold place winner gets ousted usually because they cheated, and nobody voted for the gold medal winner. This is my problem with what the region has done. You can't appoint somebody from an election 2+ years ago and just say, okay, you were the first loser, now you get the seat. That's not how it works. Democracy must be upheld. And this is anti-democratic. I'm very disappointed in the decision made today by our regional council. Your Talkback Hour continues here on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. It is a busy Talkback Hour today. Right back to the phones we go. Kyle, good afternoon.
A little PSA. You know about it already. I sent you 90 from South Africa, $8.99 from the US of A. How does that work, my friend? Do you know? Like, these tariffs are coming in, and do you think that this is going to help out the situation with the Americans?
Your phone cut out there for a moment, so can you please share again the price of the oranges from South Africa?
So I went to Azers on the weekend, and the South African oranges for 3 pounds were $2.93, and the same oranges from America, United States of America, were $8.99. So 3 pounds, both of them. So I don't understand how these tariffs are a good idea on the United States side if us Canadians are just going to buy those South American oranges for that are like a third of the cost, you know? So I don't know. If Canadians want to try to save money, there's a little PSA. Those oranges right now, seedless, they're juicy, and they're just as good, but that's just my step. I'm just trying to help you guys out. Thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, Kyle, appreciate that. Yes, checking prices in grocery stores and price comparing can go a long way. I remember the days of mom and dad sitting down at the dining room table, clipping coupons, physically clipping those coupons, and then deciding which store they were going to based on which coupon brought them the best value. So totally get that. And you heard Doug Ford saying, too, don't make me legislate it. He wants retailers to get in on the act and put a little Canadian flag beside the products on the price tag of the products that are Canadian made / Ontario made. So that might be something he's considering legislating, but right now he's asking retailers to come on board with it. Bob, good afternoon.
Hey, Mike.
Hello, Bob.
So how are you doing, sir? I know you've probably been asked a few times, but
I'm doing just fine, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Good.
Okay, I've got one thing about Dougie. I still think he's running to be the next Prime Minister because he's calling himself Captain Canada. And if Pierre keeps falling, I think he's going to be the next one up.
Well, Pierre will get to contest the next election. We'll see where it goes from there.
And one of the reasons I say that he's more recognizable, I think, in the States right now than Pierre is.
Well, he's the one that's all over the United States TV, that's for sure. NBC yesterday, CNN today, Fox News. Yep.
And can I say something about Pierre? Or?
Sure you can.
Okay. I got a kick out of this. He's saying he's not Donald Trump. But yeah, he's still got attack ads where he's making fun, not just of the person's platform, but the person themselves. He's making fun of to Singh by calling him a traitor, and Mark Carney, he's giving carbon tax Carney. I mean, it's the same platform as Trump had.
Well, he's just trying to position his opposition in the minds of voters. That's all.
No, he's just a puppet.
Okay. All right, Bob. I appreciate the call, as always. Afif, good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, Mike. How are you doing?
Good, thanks.
All right, first of all, Trump, what Trudeau said about, hey, we're not booing your country, we're booing your policy. Yeah, he's right. We're just booing Trump himself, not the whole country. And second of all, is there a game tonight for Rangers?
No, Friday.
Friday. Okay.
Yeah. All right, Afif, happy to be here for you. We are the home of your Kitchener Rangers, so every time they play, home or away, we will be there. And the next game up is Friday night versus the Windsor Spitfires. By the way, just because Afif brought up we're not booing your country or booing your president, don't boo the anthem. I think it's one of the dumbest things we've done in quite some time. Quite frankly, misguided, misdirected. Don't boo the anthem. Greg, good afternoon.
Hi, Mike. Just a quick question for you. With all this American booze saying come off the shelf, wouldn't somebody have already paid for it here? Like, where's it going to go? I could see order no more, but to pull it off, like, someone's got the tab, don't they? Like, or what are they doing with it?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I guess it's a good visual, isn't it, to say it's been cleared off the shelves. I guess we'll just put it in storage, and the aged scotch will be even older by the time we get to buy it.
All right, is that Dougie's plan? And that's the thing. I'm thinking, like, okay, either have a garage sale or something. Here, get rid of this, and then, sure, don't order any more. But I'm going to guess they've already paid for it rather than just simply have a tab with them.
Of course.
I don't know how it works.
They absolutely would have paid for it already. That's a very good point.
So to pull it off, like, okay, that sounds like you might as well get something for it and then start your tariff war. I don't know. Just was curious. Yeah.
Okay.
You might know.
Thanks, Greg. I never thought of it, but now that you bring it up, of course, if it's already on the shelves, it's been bought and paid for and ready to be sold back to us at a markup. I will say that it doesn't necessarily hurt because the booze ain't going to go bad. So for the time being, get it off the shelves, have your good visual, show the Americans that you mean business, and absolutely don't order more. And we'll just keep going from there. Again, this is day one. We're barely over 12 hours since the tariffs were implemented by U.S. President Donald Trump. What this looks like a week from now, I've heard people say. Those industries like automotive that depend on a supply chain are going to start feeling the impacts within a week. So we shall see how it all plays out. This is your 12 o'clock Talkback Hour on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Final minutes together today before we turn things over at 1 to the 570 News Center. And now you know with Rob Snow. Paul is on the line with us on this Talkback Hour. Good afternoon, Paul.
Good afternoon. How you doing?
Good, thanks.
Obviously, democracy is dead in Waterloo Region. That's point number one. Point number two, sort of a public service announcement. Bob, get a pen and a piece of paper. Write your thoughts down. That way you won't sound so confused when you call in. That's all I got for today.
All right, Paul, appreciate the call. Democracy is dead in Waterloo Region. I have trouble disputing that today after Regional Council's decision to appoint the runner-up, to appoint the first loser from the last municipal election, which, by the way, was over 2 years ago. Do you think voters' minds might have changed in 2 years? Anyway, Ernie, good afternoon.
Hey, Mike, I'll try to be quick here. I know it's late. My thoughts just on the tariff thing and what's going on. I'm seeing more manufacturing being brought to the U.S. Like the Taiwan president or prime minister, I'm not sure what he's called, just announced that he's going to build some more chip factories in the U.S., announced that yesterday. Honda just switched from building their Civic in Mexico, and it's going to the United States now. I'm almost wondering if this little, make Canada, weak or make them look weak, almost like a purposely done just to drive more manufacturing there instead of exactly what we're talking about, the tariff for tariff thing. I don't know if it's a strategy that's going to use, and then maybe he'll just take it away later on when he gets more businesses over there. I couldn't tell you. But the one thing I'm seeing is we're not gaining more production here, but he definitely is. I don't know what to say about that, Mike.
All right, Ernie. Well, what I would say about that is early days. Again, you heard Doug Ford probably talk about onshoring as well. Anything we need, we can build right here. It's the same idea. So I hadn't heard about the chip manufacturer and the Honda Civic relocating into the United States, but that's exactly what Donald Trump is hoping for. He wants an isolationist state. He wants to protect the American economy and its jobs. But Doug Ford has said similar things, and we've talked about this as a country too, breaking down interprovincial trade barriers, etc. Again, I am not going to claim to be an expert in any of this, but I would say on balance, free trade has benefited North America. Free trade has benefited many, if not all, of those nations involved in it. So putting that genie back in the bottle now and returning to our former insulated or isolated ways, sure, we can. I just don't know economically what that looks like. But we're going to find out over the next little while because these tariffs and the counter tariffs will have an impact. Yesterday on the show, we got a call from Mark who wanted to talk about Alex Ovechkin's chase of Wayne Gretzky's goal-scoring record that I don't want to have any part of the conversation because in my hockey world, Wayne Gretzky should always reign supreme with every record all the time. I don't really care for Alex Ovechkin. That led to Mark pointing out to me that he was unhappy with me. And David Drew, who stayed with us for the hour yesterday, said, you need to save that clip. So in case you missed it yesterday, we now have this at our disposal thanks to Mark.
Mike, you suck.
Don't forget that for the rest of your day. And if you ever want to remind me,
Mike, you suck.
Feel free, because we've got it recorded forever and ever. Amen. An update from the 570 News Center. Now you know with Rob Snow, Colin Robertson, our guy on the other side of the glass. My name is Mike Farwell. Bye for now.